All right, welcome everybody to our latest Between the Races podcast on the MX Vice Network. Thank you all for listening and supporting the site. We really appreciate it. We'd firstly like to thank our sponsor for this episode in Fly Racing. Fly Racing is aimed to provide customers with the very best in off-road performance products. Led by the revolutionary Formula S Smart Helmet, Fly Racing continues to push innovation in safety to new levels. Never before has style and technology blended together so seamlessly as the 2024 Fly Racing lineup. For more info, check out flyracing.com or your local Western Power Sports dealer. Follow at Fly Racing on social media and cheer for all the Fly Racing riders in the Super Motocross World Championship. All right, firstly, welcome Jason Thomas. How's life? And thanks for joining us, mate. Obviously, it's been a busy day for you traveling, no doubt.
Yeah, it's been good. It's not a very long trip for me to get to San Francisco, so that really helps. But everything's good here. The weather's beautiful. I think we're going to deteriorate pretty significantly over the next 48 hours or so. But I'm going to enjoy it for what it is for now, and let's just hope for the best for Saturday.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Obviously, we're expecting a little bit of that mud coming in. So obviously, it's the talking point among the fans at the moment. So obviously, that'll make things a little bit more different. But overall, everyone seems to be pretty happy to be heading back to San Francisco, mate. So just tell us about how it is for you, and also great job on the TV coverage on the weekend, mate. You and the team smashed it. So just tell us a bit about your night as well at A1.
Well, my night was pretty good. For me personally, I'm just trying to continue to improve, be a better analyst, and add to the TV show, and really just give my bosses on the weekend what they're looking for out of the broadcast. And if I can do that, I think they'll continue to give me opportunities and allow me to be on the team. So that's really my goal. Thankfully, the racing on the track gave us all we could want. It was good battles, and Jet and RJ did their thing, but there was just a lot to talk about throughout the weekend. Some surprises, some things we expected that did play out. But overall, I think for everybody, unless you were a racer who had a bad night, it was hard to leave there without being satisfied with the weekend.
Yeah, it was a pretty awesome weekend for sure, mate. And obviously from a Fly Racing perspective, RJ Hampshire getting the win was just amazing too. He looked great, speed, skill. Got that mindset too, mate. He just wants to win all the time. Sometimes maybe doesn't back it down when he should, because there was a couple of moments in qualifying and whatnot. But yeah, how good was that for you and the brand, mate?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, he's our big hope, right? We have Max Anstey on the East Coast that we're expecting big things from too. But, I've been kind of hyping it up a little bit, but really more because it's what I believe. I truly think this is RJ's year. And when you really look at how 2023 went for him, where he is, I know they made improvements with motorcycle behind the scenes, who he's up against. It's hard for me to make a case why he wouldn't come out and win. And racing is not predictable. We know that. And especially with a guy like RJ who has, a tendency to crash at times. We've seen it over the course of his career, but just on paper, I just felt like it lined up really nicely for him. And yeah, he made me look smart on the weekend. So congrats to him. Congrats to everyone involved. And of course, for Fly Racing, it was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And obviously anyone that wants to hear your thoughts immediately after the race, that industry seating podcast you do is pretty cool, mate. So listen to that, fans, because that gives a great insight from someone that's on the floor every weekend and just has that insight, don't you, mate? So I guess looking towards the track this weekend too, mate, obviously with it being a mudder, that would favour guys that start well, and obviously people like AP and Barsha who love that kind of stuff. So any sort of key things that sort of catching your eye with the track this weekend, mate? Obviously it's going to be at a level where it's not too difficult in these first couple of rounds like you mentioned, but yeah, just give a little insight on that podcast you do on the mud and the track this weekend.
Yeah, so if you want to check my podcast out, as you mentioned, and thank you very much for that, it is called Industry Seating, and I usually try to get it out by Monday. Just depends on my travel schedule, but I really just kind of talk by myself and kind of go through the weekend from my perspective, and I get to steer it how I want to. It may not be for everyone, but I really enjoy doing it, and that's, to me, the most important part. So invite everyone to check that out. As far as this weekend goes, the track, we'll see. The weather, as I mentioned off the top, is the biggest variable. Let's assume it doesn't rain. I don't think the track's all that dissimilar in concept from Anaheim. Now, is the track map the same? No, it looks nothing like it. But conceptually, I think it's similar because it has like the first, and I'm talking in American baseball terms. So for those of you that are maybe in Europe or wherever, you may not fully understand, or it may not click with you, but all these stadiums right now on the West Coast are typically baseball stadiums. So they're built around what a baseball diamond would be. And on the first baseline and the third baseline are going to be the longest straight line opportunities that we have. So at Anaheim, you'll see it again at Anaheim too, I'm sure. This weekend in San Francisco, this type of layout on a baseball diamond, you're going to have rhythm sections go along the first baseline and the third baseline. And we have that again. And then outside of that, the track is kind of easy. There's one whoop section versus there was two at Anaheim. And then there's a lot of like the fast switchback, short straightaway type things that you saw at Anaheim as well. And that's not necessarily because they're trying to make them similar. A lot of that is the way a baseball diamond is laid out. It just kind of has to cross over itself several times, because if you think about a long rhythm section on each of the longest ends of the stadium, and then you have a start straight cutting through the middle of everything, you're almost going to have to cut across the start straight several times to piece a motocross or a supercross track together. So a lot of these tracks end up looking the same or feeling the same, but it's really more of the stadium kind of forcing the track designer's hands than it is them wanting it to look or feel the same.
Yeah, it's going to be really cool to see how it races and plays out. And the guy we want to obviously touch on with the MXGP, focus on MX Vice as well. Obviously, how did you see Prado's night? Obviously, he admitted to struggling in the whoops and just struggling with racing at night a little bit. He was a lot of discomfort all day, really. So many unfamiliar things. And he obviously got lapped by Jet 2, which, is not ideal. But obviously getting 13th is still a pretty credible effort. I guess you sort of step back and remove yourself. It's pretty amazing achievement stepping into it, what he's done, mate. So how did it hit the expectations for you?
Yeah, I think it was maybe not quite on paper what he was looking for, but I don't know what more you could expect. For those that are, MXGP purists and maybe you don't care for Supercross, I get it. I understand, and that's totally fine, but they are very different disciplines. And for Jorge, he really has zero Supercross experience whatsoever. He didn't go the route of Dylan Ferrandis, or especially a lot of the French stars that we've seen over the years, where they spent a lot of time practicing and racing Supercross in their youth. Jorge didn't do any of that. So it's going to take a minute. And you also remember he's jumping into the deep end of the pool. He's riding the 450 class, where you think about Grant Langston or any of outside of Sebastian Tortelli, everyone else kind of went through the small bike class, cut their teeth a little bit, gained experience, and then once they were prepared, they went after, the best in the world at this discipline. So it wasn't all that surprising for me. He got the start in the main event that we all know, he is one of, if not the best starter in the world. That remains. But the intensity, the just being, he's mentioned in a podcast after the race about how everything was new for him. The format, they use different signs for the heat race or the main event as far as like what they're going to use as far as a 30-second board. The practicing format, like sometimes you're allowed to practice start, sometimes you're not. Like it was all new. The entire day was just new after new after new after new. So it's a lot getting thrown at him. And then on top of all that, look at the results. Like Eli Tomac got 9th, So it wasn't like it was a weak field with a bunch of privateers running around 10th. That's not what this field is right now. You have factory riders all the way to 15th. So it's going to be an uphill climb. You have guys like Malcolm Stewart and Christian Craig and these guys that are former champions in the 250 class that are trying to get inside the top 10. Ken Roxon got 10th in the main event, and yes, he had issues, but that shows he could only get back to 10th, shows the depth. Malcolm Stewart got 11th in the main event. So I think when you factor all those things in, it was absolutely fine. He's going to get better. And this is what I wanted him to do. Learn, be patient, understand what the situation is. And then when he comes back, which I absolutely believe he will, comes back for 2025, he's going to know in October when he starts his training for Supercross what the level is expected to be, right? Because if he didn't do this, I think he may underestimate it. And a lot of people that are watching MXGP may underestimate what Supercross, how difficult it is. And I would say the same thing for American motocross. They underestimate the speed and pace of MXGP. They're just incredibly different. And if you don't have respect for each other's discipline and their specialty, their way of racing, then you're only fooling yourself, because those that know understand it. So it's not that he can't do it over time. It's not that he won't ever figure it out. you just have to give it the time and the learning and the respect it deserves. Nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah, it was absolutely, yeah, it's just so cool. Obviously, it gets so much attention and it's just great for the sport in general. Him taking a leap like that. And obviously, another man that's great for the sport, Jet Lawrence, just excelled again. I guess we're running out of superlatives to describe just how good he is, mate, isn't he? Obviously, 450 Supercross debut, got the job done. Real masterclass. And obviously, like you said, that class is no joke. It wasn't like the outdoors where there was so many people injured. It was stacked. So I guess the key takeaways for you, mate, things like technique, judgment, decision making, obviously adaptability, because he did go through some adversity earlier in the day. And he's just so confident, and he is an absolute competitive beast who obviously likes to have a joke and laugh outside the sort of framework of the racetrack. But yeah, when he's on, isn't he, mate? He's certainly, the gate drops and he's sort of well and truly dialed in. So yeah, it's just so cool to see him progressing and just great for the sport. And obviously he's managed so well by the team and his family and his dad especially. And it was definitely mixed fortunes for him and his brother, wasn't it, mate? So how did you see Jets night? Pretty impressive, wasn't it?
I mean, the guy's just a freak. And, I mean that in the best way possible. You think about what he's done since he's got climbed onto a 450, and it's remarkable. Like outside of Charlotte, he hasn't shown any vulnerability really whatsoever. You can make what you want of the Chicago incident with Roxon, but he was winning the race when he waved him by. Whether he would have or wouldn't have, I don't really care. It's just been one impressive thing after another. Just that, how else can you impress me or make my jaw drop on the floor? And it's not that he's going out and winning by 30 seconds. That's how kind of James Stewart went about things. He's just managing the races. And I don't quite understand how someone with his personality and like he's just got this like youthful kind of a personality where he doesn't take things seriously. He's constantly joking. And if you spoke with him, I think you'd understand, not necessarily you, Ed, but just in general, if you got to speak with him privately, you'd understand like he very much acts and talks like a kid, but he races like a multi-time champion that's 30 years old and has the sport under his thumb. That's what he races like. So we've kind of been talking about that same thing for the better part of 6 months now, that same dynamic, but I don't really know how to square it. And I still don't, because every time I think like, okay, this is going to be a learning moment for him because it's a new thing and he's going up against the best of the best and they have all the experience and he doesn't. He proves another way to kind of just show me that none of that really matters when we're talking about him. So like you said, we're running out of superlatives for him. It is truly remarkable to watch this kid. I believe that a legend is being developed and the legend of Jet Lawrence is unfolding right before our eyes. And we don't know what this looks like in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, but it certainly feels like we're watching history being made by this kid.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And I guess it's bad for the rest of the field, isn't it? You don't want to let a guy sort of run away with it, especially gaining confidence. And I guess it's pretty ominous for the other guys, and it's a little bit depressing and sort of deflating seeing him doing what he's doing. And obviously someone like Sexton who's so determined, and he definitely wasn't particularly happy with that podium, even though it's just good result to get the points. But is there a chance he runs away with it now, especially getting the ball rolling like that in your mind?
There is certainly a chance. I don't think it's going to go that way, though. I really don't. When I kind of look at how good Cooper Webb was, how good Jason Anderson was, we know Tomac's going to figure it out, right? Like for everyone thinking Tomac was going to come in and win, which some of my friends did, I was like, I just don't see it. Like I've been hurt too many times and I know how difficult it is to come back from a big injury. I think it's going to take him a little bit of time and we're seeing that kind of play out. But there are plenty of riders who are going to have really good nights. So I don't think it's going to be complete domination. That doesn't mean he won't be the champion and by a wide margin. I just don't think it's going to be the runaway situation where we show up in Detroit and then Birmingham and wherever, and we're like, yeah, I already know Jet's going to win. The way it was with James Stewart or some of these years where it was just complete and utter domination. I don't personally see that happening. It just may end up that over the course of 17 rounds, Jet proves to be the best guy and the best guy by a lot. I just don't think it's going to be where no one else has a chance, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a massive season. We're going to see so many awesome battles, and those other guys aren't going to lie down. They're just going to be so fierce to get at it again, aren't they, mate? And just a little side story, obviously, those field experiences the Lawrence brothers are doing. What was your perception of that? Obviously, it looked really cool. It's a cool thing to, bridge the gap between the sport and the mainstream and just get some outside fans. And even if Jet does win, it's just a pleasure watching him ride, isn't it? And seeing him develop. And he has that star power and X factor like, guys like Roxon and Deegan that transcend the sport. So obviously divides opinion as well, mate. There's a fair bit of Jet hate out there. People feel like, the promoters are throwing him down the throat a bit, and there's a bit of jealousy. You feel like dislike of him in certain fields, mate. But I guess you can't really, just be happy for him to seeing what he's doing and seeing where he's come from. The story is amazing. And I guess, your thoughts on the field experiences and a bit of that animosity towards him as well.
Yeah, it's really cool. I kind of pioneered the VIP thing. So I look upon it with a little bit of pride because I was doing that from the very beginning. And the guy running it now for them is Dan Truman with, the backing of Lucas Myrtle. Dan was my best friend and still is, was my mechanic, and also kind of, kicked off the VIP program off the back of what I was doing, did that with Chad Reed. And then that turned into, what is now the biggest program, which is the Lawrence experience. So I take some pride in it, even though I have nothing to do with it. I take some pride in it because I know a lot of the concepts that I, with some other people, developed. They've taken it and ran with it. Like, by all means, they've taken it and gone over the top. Like, it's so far past what I ever dreamt of. But yeah, I do look over it and say, yeah, this probably doesn't happen if so many years ago, 2012, and the end of 2012, we didn't start doing this thing. So that's been interesting to watch. But as far as the haters go, and that's just sport. Anytime you have somebody that is this good and this well liked, you're going to have people that don't like him. And that's to be expected. And that's why sports are so popular. Not everybody likes the best guy. You're always going to have favorite riders, and anytime you have somebody doing all the winning, some people aren't going to like that. So I kind of just shrug my shoulders at it. I don't think that Jet has given anyone a reason to dislike him. He hasn't made some huge mistake or misstep where I'm like, yeah, well, that's going to create a lot of enemies. It's just sport, and people have favorites. And if your favorite's not doing very well and another guy's winning all the time, yeah, you're probably not going to like that guy. So I don't put much credence into it. Speaking with Hunter and Jet and Dazzy and everyone involved, I truly believe they do things the right way. They are mature. They're respectful when they talk to people, and just so happen to be doing all the winning. Guess what? They deserve all the credit. You do all the winning and you treat people well, you're going to get nothing but respect from me. And that's how I think that everybody should treat them. I know that's not how they're going to. I get it. But that's how I think it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much more positives than negatives associated with it for the sport and everyone involved. And just quick few words on Hunter's night. Obviously not ideal at all, mate. As you said, sort of a weekend from hell, you probably want to quickly forget that one and just move on to the next race, mate. So just how was he after the race? Did you sort of see how flat he was and just how disappointed that was for his debut in the 450 class?
Yeah, it's probably just shocked more than anything, right? And it was just a bad weekend all the way around for him. He started out on Friday at press day, had a huge crash. The video was floating around out there. And then he crashed again on Saturday in qualifying practice. Maybe a couple times I saw him picking his bike up. And then that rolled into the heat race, which really wasn't his fault. Vince Friese did what Vince Friese does. And then the LCQ is the only time that I really put some blame on him because his start was horrific. He was the last person going into the first turn. And his gate pick, he was on the inside. It wasn't a bad gate pick. Maybe not ideal, but it wasn't bad. I walked down and looked at his line of sight for the first turn before it, and it was fine. But he got absolutely smoked coming off the starting line. He got cut off, and then he was last. So when you're Hunter Lawrence, a former 250 champion, you're on a factory team, a factory bike, and you have as much talent as he does, that can't happen. And then he kind of picked his way through the first few laps of the LCQ and in the end came up short. So it was just a bad sequence of events. The LCQ, probably he deserves to take some blame there. But I would just forget all of it and come into San Francisco and pretend it never happened. That's easy for me to say, but I've also had some horrible races in my life. I've had some horrible A1s, and you can't dwell on it because you just have to pretend nothing really went well, because I think it's easier for him to do that, I should say, because this was not a result of poor riding. When I had bad A1s, some of the time I just rode really poorly. And that's hard to forget because you were just too slow. That wasn't really Hunter's problem. He just couldn't stay off the ground and first turn crashes and all that. So it's a little bit easier, I think, to square it and say, yeah, horrible turn of events. I just can't put myself in bad spots, but the riding is fine. I'll qualify well and everything will be different. So that's what I expect. I don't think it'll look anything like it did in Anaheim. And if he told me he got 7th place this weekend, I would say, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, we're definitely looking for a bounce back from him for sure, mate. And the other guys that filled out the podium, obviously Anderson looked good, fit, healthy, happy, and the bike as well. He's obviously mentioned to you at those media days earlier just how much of a uplift he's had there. And he was pretty open in the press conference, just admitting maybe he was a bit distracted last year. Obviously, so much going on with the family, obviously off the track, and maybe it sort of took him away a little bit. But now he's well and truly back to that level of 2022, hopefully. And in the past, he's just such a great rider, and when he's flowing, like he's kind of one with the bike, isn't he, mate? So your thoughts on Anderson, obviously Sexton as well, which we touched on earlier too, mate.
Yeah, Anderson was great. I talked to him on the podium a little bit before we went live, and you could see relief in him. He also got a new trainer for this year. He's still working with Brock Tickle some, but he brought on Alex Martin and John Wessling to just mix things up a little bit, the off-the-bike training stuff. And I think he needed it. He just needed some change and to freshen the program up a little bit. So you can tell he's just back, right? Whatever he had in 2022, you can tell that fire is there again, and he is back to that form. So, I would expect him to be similar to this. That doesn't mean he's going to be on the podium every weekend, but it's not going to be that we're not going to leave each weekend going, where the hell is Jason Anderson, right? Like, where is that form and all that speed that we're used to seeing? I think he kind of rekindled that. So that's great to see. And then moving to Chase Sexton, it wasn't a great weekend. You look at qualifying, it was okay. He really pulled it together in that final session, but then the heat race was a mess, right? He had to come back through the pack just to get in the main event. And then the main event itself wasn't anything special. He was, if you take Cooper Webb's crash out of it, he ends up 4th and a lonely 4th. He wasn't able to close the gap down on Anderson or Cooper Webb at all. And for a while, Aaron Plessinger was actually catching him. Now, Sexton kicked it into gear, and I think he rebounded like fitness wise and it's like, okay, I can't let my teammate get me here. Like, that's not going to happen. But he was going to be 4th in that main event, and Webb crashing kind of changes the narrative a little bit, but I think we have to be truthful and say, okay, this wasn't a great race for Sexton, and he's likely 4th, which feels a lot different than 3rd. And, for Sexton, there's no upside in talking about it or looking at it that way, but as an analyst or us bench racing about it, to me, I think we have to be truthful and say, okay, that's not good enough, right? He was nowhere near where Jet Lawrence was in that main event. Jet was out cruising by himself for most of the race, and Sexton was, 10 seconds back, maybe more, 15 seconds back. I'd have to look at the lap chart. So I think he's got to take a hard look in the mirror and say, we've got to be better than this. And I think he is. The positive for Sexton is that there were a lot of people whispering that this was going to go really poorly for Chase. He had really been struggling during the week. He wasn't happy with the motorcycle. It wasn't a disaster. So if you're looking for something to be like, okay, we're okay, and that's what I think Chase was. He just took a deep breath and kind of exhaled and say, okay, it's not going to be horrific. We've got some work to do, but we can make this as a base platform and work from here. So it'll be interesting to see a week later what that all looks like. But I thought he had the most questions to answer going in, and I don't necessarily know that he's answered those to kind of, put a bow on it. I'm giving Sexton kind of an incomplete because I don't really have the answers that I need from him yet.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty cool to see how his season plays out. Obviously, so much buzz and hype around him, and obviously he's the champ. So like you said, mate, yeah, it's just a lot of unknowns still for him. But a guy that obviously everyone loves, AP, makes it so much fun, doesn't he? And the personality shines through. And he's one of those guys that can balance the seriousness of racing pretty well by still sort of keeping things pretty light and having fun, which obviously is a pretty good proven formula for a lot of guys to succeed. You look at someone like Guadagnini in Europe, he loves all the, to have a laugh, and that's how you get the best out of him, mate. So, great ride by him, AP, and obviously looked fast, confident there in 4th, and he's in great shape. He's happy with the bike, and everything's looking pretty good, isn't it, mate? He was really fast in the whoops a lot of the night, so I guess he's kind of coming in pretty primed. He had a massive year last year and obviously didn't really have a huge off-season break with the Motocross of Nations, so he's pretty primed at the moment, and if the weather gods sort of go in his favour, mate, he could get that first win this weekend.
Yeah, I'm a huge AP fan, and that's probably where I should always start the conversation because I'm gonna give glowing reports about him. I love his personality, and it's interesting for me. It's so true to form when you're down there in the tunnel before Anaheim, before opening ceremonies. I mean, that's like the most get nervous time of the year, I think, for everybody. Like, there's a lot of stern faces and kind of wrinkled foreheads because everybody's feeling the tension and nervousness of a new year and expectations. And there's been months and months and months of work put in by you and your whole team to be ready for this moment. And you don't know what that's going to look like. Is it going to be like Jet Lawrence or going to be like Hunter Lawrence? And that's the fear. Most of the time, it's going to be somewhere in between, but it can all go terribly wrong, just like it did for Hunter. And I got to talk to AP, and he was so relaxed, like he was just hanging out. And I'm like, man, you don't seem nervous at all. And he's like, I'm really not. To me, I couldn't imagine feeling like that because I could barely talk. I was so nervous at Anaheim 1. So to see him just kind of chill like that, it's remarkable to me. I wish I could have absorbed or learned how to be more like him in those moments because I think it served him well is really the point I'm getting to. He was able to ride like himself and ride loosely and fast and not let the tension and expectation of the moment be the defining characteristic. And we saw that in his riding. Like, he was really, really good all night long. So kudos to him for being able to kind of put it all in perspective and be like, hey, it's just another race. We're going to be fine. And I'm not expected to win the title. So I'm just going to go do my thing. And I think that really helped him on a huge stage like that to get fourth. Was it a podium? No. But everybody there that was paying attention left there going, man, like AP was pretty damn good.
Yeah, I know. It's so cool to see him doing well. And obviously everyone wants to see that win in the future, mate. Hopefully it's coming sooner rather than later. And just before we wrap this one up, mate, any sort of last words on, obviously, Ferrandis getting fifth was pretty impressive. Like we've talked about, he's so happy on that program. It's interesting to hear the comment that he said the team doesn't really necessarily have immense resources, but there's such smart, intelligent people working together as a unit to get those results. So that'll be a really good boost of confidence and momentum for him. Then obviously Kenny and Mookie had good rides through the field. They'll be looking to bounce back. And Webb was definitely better than expected for sure. Obviously, you never doubt Webb, do you, mate? So, and then obviously Tomac we touched on with a sort of a subpar night, which was somewhat to be expected. And yeah, Justin Cooper, unheralded ride under the radar, beating Tomac. So pretty impressive few guys you'd like to take on there.
Yeah, I mean, all the way through the field, there seems to be storylines. I was very impressed by Ferrandis, no question about it. There are a lot of skeptics with that program going in, and I think he shut a lot of people up. I wasn't really one of them. I didn't have any positive or negative expectation. I was just kind of like, let's wait and see. But I give him an A grade for the weekend. Great job from him. And yeah, we'll see where it can go from here. But all those great comments he was making about the Honda, I think he backed those up. And that's all you can really do is, you can talk about it, but when it's really time, you have to be about it. And I think he did the job. So great job to him. And Ziggy at Factory Connection is likely who he's speaking of, the smart people. And I've worked with Ziggy a lot in my career, and he is a brilliant, brilliant guy. And you can see that kind of shining through that program. And then moving through the field, Mookie and Roxon both, they had problems, right? You get caught up in the first lap and you don't get to show kind of what you had. Roxon was flying in his heat race, and I don't think it was reported on enough. But he was ready to go to war with whoever in the main event. I think he had the pace to go with Jet if he had gotten out front with him. So I think Kenny knows that, and we'll see what Kenny can bring this weekend, especially if we have inclement conditions. Kenny is great in a situation like that, in the mud, in really challenging technical conditions. Kenny's phenomenal. So we'll see if he can have a bounce back and maybe get a surprise win early. That would be great for everybody involved. I think for the sport in general, it's just a better sport when Kenny's at his best. And then, you mentioned Justin Cooper, really underrated ride. There are way too many things to talk about for Justin Cooper to get a lot of credit. But for him to come up and pass Eli Tomac, I think spoke volumes, and myself and I think other people kind of had questions about where does Justin Cooper fit in 450 Supercross, because it is so deep. And when it comes to pro motocross this summer, I'm fine. Like, I think he'll be a top 5 mainstay. But in Supercross, I don't really know. And if he can stay around eighth a lot of the time. And then when he has the outlier positive weekend, if he can get, the fourth, fifth, and maybe challenge for a podium if the opportunity arises, I think that's absolutely fine. And he should be commended for it, because we want to talk about somebody coming in with zero expectation. That is the definition of Justin Cooper Supercross season. He's got Eli Tomac and Cooper Webb as his teammates, right? So how can you have expectation when those two are sharing the truck with you? And I thought he delivered. I thought he did a great job of just flying under the radar and putting in a solid result. And it had to feel good for him passing Tomac. I'm sure he understands Tomac's coming off an injury, and he understands that Tomac's going to get better, but you're passing the second all-time winningest rider, two-time champion, and the team leader of your truck, and you get to pass him at the opener. That had to feel good for him coming back to the truck.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Well said. Great insight. And just quickly, before I let you go, any final thoughts, mate? Obviously, the atmosphere looked great. There were so many cool different bits of gear on show and bike plastics. And I guess the Fox one piece on Craig definitely caught the eye, and all the cool stuff Fly was doing, mate. Obviously, there's some pretty cool stuff in the works for Fly that you've got in the plans, mate. So just a few words on that, and how excited are you for this weekend, mate?
Yeah, it's always fun to see everybody's new gear, new look, and everything. A lot of people, including Fly Racing, we don't do too much at the opener because there's so much fanfare that it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. Like if you try to do limited edition gear or really stand out, there's just too much. There's too much spectacle. There's too many things that are, bright, shiny objects to grab the people that are tuning in. You're not going to get any real focus on it. So we have some things in the works coming up over the next few weeks. And I'll certainly, share on this show as well. But yeah, I think that was the same for a lot of brands, is they're kind of holding back stuff that they want to release because everybody knows the opener is just too crazy. Like you're not going to get really any sort of emphasis or a highlight shined upon it. So we'll see what everybody has. But yeah, the Fox thing was cool. I don't personally think that's ever going to be a consumer item. But as far as brands pushing the envelope, I'm all for it. With our Formula S, the things we've done in the helmet game with adding smart technology to helmets, like I think we're absolutely doing that as well. So kudos to them for thinking outside the box. And I think, materials and possibilities are rapidly improving and continue to do so. So, we never know what's kind of around the corner, but I do applaud anybody who's willing to take a chance like they did.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. It was a great weekend, and obviously thank you for taking the time to join us, mate, and thank you to Fly Racing for sponsoring this one. Obviously, go check them out at Fly Racing USA and social media and follow all their riders this weekend and across the globe. So thanks again, JT. All the best and have a great weekend, and we look forward to speaking soon.
Thanks, Ed.
No worries, mate. Have a good one.